So, for me, the worst of it all, I even realized it right away, was going to be the loneliness. And yeah, I mean, even though my wife and I led a life together that was probably less engaged than I've had with college roommates that I lived with. I'm not talking about dorm roommates or whatever. I'm talking about housemates that, maybe I'd game with a couple times a week and we'd go out to the bar and throw some darts or something or go for a walk together or whatever. My wife and I did less than that. We ran into, she was in the main part of the house very little time period. So, that added up to maybe 15, 20 minutes a day. We would eat dinner together for maybe another 40 minutes total, but towards the end, she drifted way off. I think by the time she had decided, well, first she had the oral surgery, and that had reasons why it reduced our time together, and then I think after that, sometime after that, she made her decision, and I don't know. I really don't know, because soon after the oral surgery, she was kind of amused or amusable, and then after, I think there was a point where the decision had been made where it was very, very hard to get a smile out of her or anything. And she almost always would laugh at my silly antics or whatever. But and then I would go down to her room maybe 2-3 times a day, knock on the door and just chat with her for a few minutes, and then run upstairs, unless I had something, like a squirrel to show her or something that would make her actually happy. But there was very, very little interaction. But knowing there was somebody around, and those few minutes at a time, that worked fine for me, and I'm assuming it worked fine for her insofar as meeting her needs for human companionship, because there was little or no desire expressed for more than that. Every now and then we'd click and we'd have a deeper conversation about something. But deeper conversations don't come 10 years into a relationship very often, but they never really did with us. They were always, it was always more standoffish. Anyway, what I'm saying is, sure, I didn't have a huge amount of contact with her. We didn't spend a whole lot of time together. Our biggest event at any point where we'd spend time together, over the course of a week, eating dinner each night and hanging around while cooking it or whatever, which wasn't long, because if she couldn't really cook, so if she was cooking, which was the usual, it was like, mac and cheese or something like that. But and if I was cooking, I wouldn't insist on company. I'm just not that kind of person. I would give her company while she was cooking because I wanted the company, but yeah, I didn't push for anything ever. I never felt like I had any claim on her time in a way that is not the same with other relationships, and maybe the same way the other way around too. There was just too much distance. And again, it was kind of we were housemates who, had tried to have a more sexual relationship initially and had grown quite fond of each other. But there's a difference. So, for example, my sense of humor is not not PC at all. It's not the kind of thing that I would be able to share with someone right away. And then with the long period of time, of course, there's two people are going to come up with speak their own little inside jokes and everything, and all that's dead now, right? Dead with her. But just, you can't revive that kind of stuff. Some of it maybe can carry over with someone else at some point. I think all of that could work with just a normal housemate type situation. What couldn't is some simple comforts, like I didn't have to wear clothing. I would feel pretty fucking weird certainly around another male, but around a female that I hadn't had that kind of more intimate relationship with, to just do this, and then some of the kinds of jokes that might work between frat boys, but not so much with me. It's not the kind of humor that I'm into, except with someone that I actually either am or was in a relationship with. Something like, oh, I don't know what to eat. Well, you should eat my dick. It's not funny or anything. It's just, it becomes sort of one of a characteristic, a personality that comes out or whatever, and it's just kind of like just this silly shit that throws out. There were other things that also, I don't know. Well, there were things that I never created that kind of existence with someone else. So, for example, I would take on these different personas with her. Now, I would do this lightly with other people, I guess, but, I had, yes, we will get the dinner ready, madam. I had this butler character who happened to be cannibalistic, and I just had this whole set of different characters that I would interact with her with, and it just, they just come up in the moment. Another thing was, I was never comfortable singing. I don't know what happened, but sometime between, I think it's the dancing and being willing to sing on the dance floor and whatever. But I became comfortable with singing out loud with her around, and so there were, I would make up silly songs and stuff. And I would sometimes just sing home, what were like a musical, but just like, an answer to questions and everything, as though, we were living in a musical. It was just one of those cute little jokes and stuff. I honestly don't think that I could be that free with either of those things. The same way as like running around without pants, or some of the more ribald statements that I would make. I don't think I could take on these other humorous things with a housemate that I hadn't had that intimate relationship with. But it's kind of hard to tell, because I've never been in that situation. Housemates I've had maybe for 2 years. Who knows? Maybe that level would develop, in some ways. And certainly everything didn't all happen within the first week. That would drive anyone crazy to have that kind of rush of existence on them. But yeah, I mean, like right from the moment that I found the body, my first selfish thought was, wow, I'm really going to miss having her around. None of sort of those big grief things. And all throughout, that has been, if there is any selfish thing, that has been the big one. Is, I'm on a walk and I see the bunny rabbits eating grass down in the alley, and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to be able to tell her that I saw the bunnies were out today. I'm not going to be able to tell her about this interesting cat I saw. I know that, and I think I have to go this week, but I may put it off depending. I may be going tomorrow. I know that shopping is going to be real hard. That was the biggest period of time that we would spend together on any regular basis. Every 2 weeks, an hour and a half to the supermarket. We'd split up in the supermarket to get stuff for the most part, and then an hour and a half back, more or less. Call it an hour and 15 down, an hour and a half back, because I take rests on the way back. My body has trouble pulling the whole cart. Of course, I won't have to pull as much. There's that. Which is actually a big deal, because physically I was starting to have trouble hauling enough for both of us since the COVID. But yeah, I mean, it's things like that. And I felt it the first day before I even knew she was dead, because I already had my suspicions. She wasn't well. She wasn't showing up. That had happened a couple times before where she had gotten, maybe sick enough that she wasn't up for most of a day or something, and I'd gotten a little worried. But this time, especially with the dream that I had woken up with the day before while she was still alive but damaged. But anyway, I mean, and the thing is, in those periods, I'm like looking at it and saying, I would miss her if she's dead, and it wouldn't be a whole lot more than that, I think. And it's turned out to be more than I thought. But part of it is because it's not, it's not just, oh wow, I'll miss her, but maybe in 3 months I'll get a roommate or I'll meet somebody new. No, it's not going to happen. I know how many fucking years it took between my first ex-wife and being in a situation that was the same, like with her, where I had someone that I was comfortable enough, around, because maybe just because we had sex, whatever. Maybe because I could fool myself into the idea that we had the kind of relationship that I had with my first ex-wife after a long period of time, or whatever. Whatever fights, whatever disagreements, whatever big, negotiations over who's holding what where, those had all kind of settled themselves out, and I don't think that anybody's happiness, I mean, like, I know she would say that she missed me falling asleep next to her, but to me that was not an acceptable situation, because she would leave right after I fell asleep, and in terms of comfort level, I would rather be in bed where I can have the light on and read for a little bit, and she didn't like the bright lights and stuff like that. So, I mean, it worked out to, like, okay, well, let's negotiate a separate piece here on this issue. And it wasn't like there was any argument about it just drifted into that, like most things drifted in our lives, and most things drift in any relationship over time. I think the stability and the question of whether or not something lasts is really, can those compromises be made or not? Can you settle for, yep, this actually didn't work out the way, because I don't think anything does. This didn't work out the way it perfectly could have and looked like it was going to, and it also, and that means, of course, that there would always be, for most people, there would always be sort of this, oh, well, geez, I missed those first few months or years together. Um, Maybe I can get that again with someone else, and maybe it'll be real this time or something. It's never fucking real, right? It's like there's a willingness to please on both people's parts, or all people's parts, assuming that you're going beyond a pairing, and a willingness to explore things, and then you find out, yeah, no, some of those things just I'm not too happy with. Or also there's not just that, but there's that first blush of infatuation or whatever, which can last a few years even. It didn't, the two of us, we never had it, but with other relationships I've had it, where, you just want to be with that person so much that things that maybe you're not all that into feel a lot more fun. And I feel like some of that was true with her gaming with me. I didn't feel like I had it. There was nothing she particularly wanted to do with me. Like, and I'm not sure what there could be, because she was even more desiring of alone time than I am. And you can't really share alone time. There was nothing that clearly convinced. And maybe also, I've always been with people who pushed for things more, who were more like, so I'm used to being the lazabout. I'm used to being the person who, I just want to do my thing all by myself or whatever, or I don't really want to go out or whatever. So I was always the one who needed to be convinced to go out. And now that was reversed. So it's as if she's doing me a favor to do the things with me that other people would have to convince me to do. So there was this total unbalance there, where I was just trying to look for things where we could be happy together to any degree. The only possible exception to that would be watching movies together or something. I don't know why we didn't, and again, that may be a lack of forcefulness on her part. We watched some things like South Park together, and, I don't know, at points, and then, but that was generally this mealtime TV thing that did last. It just mutated across different things, and became more associated with mealtime and less with other things. But anyway, the point that I was trying to get to was, I honestly have no hope any longer. I have no hope any longer, because, and I had very little hope before her. By the time we agreed, because the kind of person, first of all, I'm fucking weird, right? There. Sometimes I say, well, maybe there's like 1% or 0.1% of the population I could get along with. It's twisted. I can sort of superficially deal with a larger grouping or larger sets of people, but for someone that I would share a life with, it's probably way under that 0.1%, like way under. And there's just so many different things, and there's layers of it too. So like, it would be very, very difficult for me to get to that level of acceptance and comfort with someone I wasn't physically attracted to, at the least. And my tastes are kind of extreme. Not extreme, but my tastes are not really like, oh, well, that's okay. I mean, first of all, I can't deal with the amount of fat that I have. Anybody who, you could be in a lot better shape than I am, and I'd be like, yeah, no. And there's just this sort of it's not even physically attractive. I have to find someone appealing to look at. If they're not, I cannot, like, I will be constantly looking away from them. I'm usually going to be looking away from people anyway, because that's just how I am. But, wow, if the few times that I glance, I don't like what I see, that's going to be bothersome to me. And that's just, I don't know why that is. I don't know what's up with that. I just don't know. I have such extremes in terms of the things that I expect, and I'm not talking, yes, if we're talking about a sexual relationship, yes, I probably have some quirks there too. I'm usually told the things that I'm really ashamed of, I'm like, well, that's actually like just normal, dude. But I do become fixated on them. No, it's more a matter of these things that I'm just not willing to bend on. There's an example. With the shopping. Either getting the groceries delivered or taking a taxi back was just it wasn't like, no, we cannot possibly do that. What are you thinking? That's crazy. But it was, no, but we might, if we do that, it's because it's such an emergency. You know what I mean? It's not, and probably people who were more, I'm having trouble finding the right word, more ideologically, insistent that they should not do this for whatever reason, might actually be more willing to bend on it. I mean, we fucking went out in bad situations when one or both of us was sick, or we put off and made it difficult on ourselves due to lack of groceries or whatever. In situations where I think any normal person, first of all, any normal person would have had a car, There's also the things I'm so fucking bad at. So, like, anything that breaks my routine, anything where I have to make contacts with people to get stuff done, whatever, I'm really lousy at that, and cannot be relied upon for it. So, like getting repairs done on the house, I can't get that done. I used to rely on my first ex-wife to help arrange stuff like that and to do everything in my fucking life, basically. I mean, I don't know what I did. I cleaned house. I really was in the same kind of role my last ex-wife was in with me, where I couldn't really justify why I was there, except that I presumably made her happy, and I made her less and less happy with time. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I just am not the leaving type, and that includes leaving by taking my own life. I get used to my patterns and I don't stop them. But, yeah, the chance of someone that I can get along with, well, someone I can get along with is probably more likely to be able to cope with the ridiculous things that that I'm going to demand, that I'm going to insist upon about life. And it's not like, it's totally dictatorial. I mean, I can be stood up to in certain conditions or whatever, and I do bend, like I don't know, my last wife was wearing makeup all the time. That was something that was an absolute no-no for me. But, that's her. That's her choices. But likewise, there might have been something like, well, if you want to fucking drag your little grocery cart up the hill, that's fine. I don't want to go for those long walks. And maybe that would work out. Maybe I'd be okay with that. I don't know. I know I had fantasies back in Phoenix of meeting someone with a car, though. So if I meet a normal person who aligns with me enough, and I've met normal enough people who align with me normally enough that I could have relationships with people who had cars. And hell, I might even have one if they took care of making sure that like it gets repaired and stuff, and yearly check it ups and everything. And if I can get it cheap like I did my last one. No, the point is there's such a tiny, tiny slice that I get along with, and then that's further bisected by that will be able to cope with how fucked up I am in certain ways, in very simple ways, like that I bury my garbage in my yard, I don't know, in addition to with the bigger ways, with what a complete, I am not anywhere near sane, and just, have my difficulties, and how to cope with those is something different, and that doesn't seem to be that important. Like my last ex and I were able to deal with the fact that neither of us could cope with anything in life, to some extent. And so maybe that was the cause. Who knows? But there was more beyond that. So much more. Vague feelings that, I don't think, so one thing, I don't think a real adult could cope with me. But on the other hand, I don't know how much that has to do with age, however, that attraction, the appeal, youth is beautiful to me. And, I'm obviously not, anybody who shares that view isn't going to be interested in this old man anymore. That the prettiness that I had at one point is gone, and I can take the beard off and dye the hair or whatever, and it looks better, but there's still some signs of age there. And physically, then I'm also obviously old and fat, and that's not good. Fat I could probably take care of eventually if I go through enough pain. But the truth of the matter is, I moved so I went through, after my first wife kicked me out, I went through, okay, I'll go back to undergrad school for something, and I worked my ass off there and wasn't, associating with people all that much. But some of the hope had been, I'll meet people. Not just necessarily I'll run into some beautiful, lovely woman while I'm sitting under the arch, but also just meet people who are friends that it starts becoming connections, and that web will enhance my chances. It didn't happen. There were hints of it starting to happen right at the very end. Well, not at the very end, but like a year before I graduated. But they didn't really persist throughout the year, and they didn't lead anywhere. Nowhere at all. I hung out a couple of times, and sometimes that happens, and that's what happens. But I didn't find links. I didn't find people. One of the things being that shared interest stuff, right? Like, I very seldomly will meet people that I just boom right away click with, unless they're gamers. People that I'm around that are gamers, the advantage there is that I have enough time for me to get used to their existence, enough to like them, whatever. It doesn't have to be that, though. Like, I've had where I'm sitting at a meal and I kind of fell for someone during a meal, and there have been other cases, cases where I've met people who are at least semi-gamers. One was a gamer, but I could tell by how they were, and we just clicked together over hanging out together, without having to have the same kind of interaction that I would have in a gaming situation. So I mean, there are possibilities, perhaps, and there have been things that have looked that way at other times in my life. There have been friendships that have formed that weren't by the one pattern, but honestly, they're few and far between. You know, it's hard to tie me down so that I'm with someone for long enough that that kind of friendship even develops, you know. And I feel like I'm trying to force it now, in an unhealthy sort of way. It's not me, you know. It's like just hanging out with people that I don't have that immediate link to, and that's kind of the problem. Is it just, the natural connection isn't there, and therefore the deeper connections don't have time to really form. It's just fucked up. So as I said, I went to undergrad again, and didn't find anything. Okay, so when I couldn't find an immediate job out of undergrad, I applied to and went to grad school here. And I loved this town, and I still do. But some of my hope was that same thing. Okay, you know, now I won't be living at my dad's house. I'll be living in a campus type situation. I'll be interacting with people in class, but I'll be free. I'll be walking home. I won't be stuck somewhere, you know, that's far, far away and everything. And again, I was just isolated. Not through anything anybody else was doing. People made their attempts to reach out. I don't know how to interact with anything except that at best 1%. And again, we're talking about the 1% that I can first get through. It's the 1% of that 1% or something, or maybe 10% of that 1% that I have any real chance with. But in order to make that first layer of contact, we're talking about 1% of people, okay? You know, at best. Do the math yourself. Maybe you find that's not that unreasonable. Maybe it isn't. But then it becomes very, very hard in other ways. So usually when college students, say, are hanging out together, somehow something happens. They just, you know, maybe click to some degree or something. I think just when people are thrown together, usually they interact to some degree. It don't happen here, okay? I have lived with people that I don't share interests with, and there's just, it becomes not necessarily an armed camp, but it becomes a case of me trying to ignore their existence, them trying to ignore mine, probably. I assume that, you know. There's nothing common to reach out across, is the problem. And, you know, I remember the guy I lived with for the first 6 months or so, but more people showed up, tried reaching out, and he's like, oh, you want to come see SpongeBob? Apparently he was really into watching SpongeBob, and, you know, okay, that's great. I sat and watched, but I just don't have that kind of social mirroring or whatever it takes to be able to cope with what is not intrinsic to me. And he very obviously, I had no interests, to tell you the truth, because all I could do really was maybe sit out on the porch, listen to music, and smoke my pipe. And I, mainly because I didn't want to be living with someone I didn't really feel that comfortable with, you know, I went for long walks and shit like that. You know, I was away. I was putting that wall up or closing my door and making sure that I wasn't near people and playing computer games or whatever. I shut that door because I can't. Same way my wife, my recent ex-wife was. I can't. I don't want what's unwanted, and it doesn't look like it's wanted. There has to be a big selling point, and that's really where the physical attraction and the lust comes in, right? Or if that's not there, gaming works, or. Now, with my first ex-wife, one of the things we had, at least because the lust was not intense enough ever to drive things, I think, was we had a long online relationship in terms of not like, oh wow, I can't wait to have you in my arms, darling. No, more along the lines of me and trolling in front of her or against her, or just sharing things about my life, tearing myself open in front of people while she was there. All that was important, and I would get the feedback too, so I knew. I don't know if there could be thousands of you lusting after me right now. No, trust me, I know there's not. But that interaction, even that level, just dealing with each other on a messaging board was enough to give us that commonality in a way that living in actuality with someone can't do, because, they are the impediment to my comfort. But to tell you the truth, I have lived with other roommates that were, like in college type situation where there's other people around, and I don't feel any of the comfort being around, especially the males. But to tell you the truth, anyone that I don't have that connection with, the physical attraction and mutual physical attraction, I just would not feel anything in the same. There's always going to be that, oh geez, that fucking person making noise, or some of that doesn't make a lot of sense. So some of the things, like if you remember my why drum video from long ago, there are things that I do that are just fucking weird that I have to hide from the world, and that I can't do in front of a housemate or something. The housemate will think I'm crazy, as I actually am. I mean, it's just, it's a shameful thing. It would be like being caught masturbating in the living room, whatever. I mean, it's just like, dude, what the fuck's wrong with you? So it's time to swap batteries. So the thing is, I'll keep giving the run by run. And so I mean, I came to Eugene to do grad school, and other than the dance, at the dance I thought there were a couple of times where I felt like I kind of connected with someone in terms of there was a mutual attraction, but being me, I either couldn't approach at all or couldn't push to make it clear that, yeah, it actually is. That's supposed to be the male's job, but bullshit, or I couldn't, or I think there was like one case where I did, where I was just completely wrong, and one of maybe 3 times in my life where I've sent the tendrils out in my clumsy and incompetent way by actually, broaching the possibilities. Every time has been horribly awkward, and every time I should learn not to do anything of the sort. But that's another impediment towards me finding anyone is the expectation is the male is the person who takes the initiative, and that's just not me. You know, it would be very it is so for me to do it naturally. It is awkward and pathetic, and no one, no matter how much they say they love, you know, awkward people or whatever, would have any way of dealing with it. It would be horrible, and I should know that. And part of why I don't, and I don't approach people even without any kind of, I don't know, sense of attraction, you know, is that I'm that awkward anyway, you know. But another side of it, I don't know. Some of that is I don't have a fucking right to intrude on you, and honestly, again, I'd say this is maybe larger than 1%, but I would say the vast majority of people don't have a fucking right to intrude on me either in the same sort of way. Like, it's just, man, you know, if it's fine if you're asking me, hey, what time is it? Or if you have something that's reasonable, like, oh, you're reading that book. Wow. I read that book. maybe. But yeah, I have absolutely no social comfort with that kind of thing, which is weird because there's certain things, there's certain kinds of flirting and interaction and everything at a loose level that I feel I can do. The one thing that I know I can't, there's quite a few that I can't. I have a tendency to shut people down. So people who are, even if I might have been attracted to them or something, people who do come to me, and sometimes they do because I'm a peacock or was, and and the dance as well. Something in me that I don't even fully understand shuts that all down. It just, you know. And it might be the right thing. It might be the right thing in almost every case. Well, first of all, it's going to be the right thing in 99.9% of the time, because it's that 1/10 of 1% that at best, you know, I'm going to click with. But beyond that, it might be the right thing anyway. It might be that anyone who can't overcome that sort of twisted sense of humor that I play with, for example, when I don't remember what somebody said. There's just some things that I'll say that seem so insulting and so trollish in real life, that I think people do get offended, and I think or stunned and think that I'm just shutting them down with it, when the reality is that's just my sense of humor. And honestly, if you can't cope with that, you won't be able to cope with the biting level of whatever it is I am, you know. And then beyond that, yeah, I mean, so my time in Eugene did not work out well. On the other hand, I was always living over in this student housing type thing. It wasn't really, you know, it wasn't like dorms or something, but I thought that would be a positive thing. But maybe I was a little too old to be there. You know, I was coming up on 40 at this point, and you know, everybody had different experiences than I had, and it was loud, and it was party nights and all that, and I just, I did not feel like I fit in. But that's the thing. So the relationships that I had formed before were formed in that kind of environment, not the real partyish environment, but in that collegey environment where you know, you were more likely to run into groups of people who the groups were kind of more mutable because the people weren't there forever and stuff like that. So then I moved to Phoenix, and I moved into a number of different places there. First was an apartment complex, which was mainly people I would have had nothing really in common with, um, for the most part. I met one guy eventually, like as I was moving out, or while I was trash picking the place after I moved out, who at least, you know, had played some war games or something, and we talked about getting a beer, and we never saw each other again. But yeah, for the most part, you know, these were it was a kind of a lower income place, where there just were not a lot of people that I had the same kind of shared experiences. And that's not to say that maybe somebody wouldn't have been able to be brought into some of my interests or something, but how do we meet? You know, with my exclusivity of tastes and whatnot, I just don't see any way. You know, I mean, I would go swimming when the pool was open, which wasn't all that often. I would go for walks around and, you know, maybe smile or something to someone, but there's nothing to talk about. You know, there's just nothing to talk about with me if we don't have a commonality of interests, and my interests are fixated to such limited things. Nice weather, yep. You know, but you know, what are we gonna do? What's the opening line going to be? You know, you gonna hit me about I don't know, certain aspects of history that are not really, that very few people are interested in, certain science fiction books, a couple of bands. Maybe if you hear me listening to something outside, maybe that's how my first ex and I met, actually. I was playing Violent Femmes loud, and she came up, knocked on the door. I had already thought, wow, she's damn cute. And I was getting drunk and ready to go to the bar, and because I didn't have the kind of whatever it takes to try and introduce myself or anything. But yeah, she came up because of the music, and that was awesome. Totally serendipitous. But then I moved to a couple of condos. One that I was trying to buy and then didn't succeed, and one that I did buy. And in all cases, again, you know, even though here we're talking about people who might have similar jobs to me, for those few that worked, but really, honestly, there weren't. It was mainly retirees, or actually, at the one place, it was mainly vacationers from Canada and elsewhere who were just doing time sharing there. But again, without noticing that commonality immediately, without something triggering that, I'm not going to meet that way. I didn't meet people at work, even though we shared the same kind of work thing. Why? Why would I? You know? And throughout this time, you know, board gaming was a thing. My videos were up. There might have been a couple of people who may have mentioned they saw them, but it didn't develop into any kind of more than maybe a moment or two. I wasn't hanging out at game shops or whatever. And I didn't, you know, Phoenix is not a good town for me. This one, I've always felt like geez, there are people here who feel kind of like me sometimes. Some of the artsier type people, even though I'm not artsy at all, they're more willing to explore uh, different thoughts, different philosophies, whatever. Not necessarily even really like, not like, oh, well, I'm going to study Nietzsche. No, it's more along the lines of the influences that lead them to that kind of lifestyle, that more bohemian lifestyle or whatever, um, are in alignment more with the influences that lead me to my kind of lifestyle, and that, which, you can't put my slobbish lifestyle. And I feel a certain kind of comfort with that, and that may be enough to find those commonalities within there if they exist. The little slices that'll be enough to hook into and to actually have a conversation. I mean, I don't know. What am I going to discuss otherwise? The end of civilization? Maybe. But when I'm going to discuss that, it's probably going to be with a MAGA person. I don't know. And at least when I was in Phoenix, I could, or at least like to flatter myself, I wasn't looking anywhere near as old. I wasn't anywhere near as out of shape. I just, at this point, it's kind of like, wow, I don't know how I'm going to get away from this loneliness, It was kind of where the bargain came down to, was after a few years with her, I started to realize, yeah, there's just no chance. It was hard enough when I was young and pretty, and more interesting, more vivacious, more intense. Now I can't be arsed to leave my house for the most part, I mean, only the pain of this current situation is bringing me out. Eventually, I'll just get to rattling around in my loneliness. And more than that, from my days in Eugene, I started getting involved in forums, etc., fora, and my trollery, etc., was very pretty to people and brought some certain kind of attraction into play. I moved to Phoenix. Everything started dying there. I had either gotten banned or no longer was interested in topics of certain things. The nature of the internet started changing, where online fora were less important and everything, and MySpace was less important, and everything was moving to this fucking Facebook model and Ajax generated shit that keeps you in streams and everything. And that's not an environment that it worked for me well. I kept my nails dug into it for a little while in the first couple of years in Phoenix, trying to hold on to those mechanisms, but they started fading away. And really, I mean, that last bit of digging in is the only thing. That's the way my ex and I met, was over that kind of forum that is comfortable and that I shine in to some extent, at least to some people. To others, I'm just a troll or a buffoon or whatever. But there's a certain level of, I don't know, this intellectual trollery that's appealing. And that's all gone now, I mean, there's no way I can distinguish. Just like I can't wear certain clothes anymore because I'm too fat. No, but also I just don't have the spirit to do it. Nothing seems right, I don't have the right place to sit to look that way anymore. So I'm a slob now, I'm not in a neighborhood. When when I first moved back to Eugene, and we started thinking about a place to live, my immediate thought had been somewhere downtownish, near, in the Whitaker or near the Whitaker, where I could sit on a porch and kind of interact with people as they're walking by. I'd have music on, whatever. I could meet people. That ain't gonna happen here. I can barely meet my neighbors, I mean, because it would have to be so perfect. Again, it's that 1/10 of 1% at best that I kind of connect with. I've talked to a couple of my neighbors. They're nice guys. I like them, but that connection ain't going to happen. Now, I would guess that at least one of my neighbors would connect with about 50% of guys my age. At least. And he's not tremendously gregarious. He's just normal. And I mean, I don't mean that in the sense that he has no quirks. He does some things that are odd and everything, but he's within, there's this huge bell curve area that everybody's in. And if you're in that, you can usually deal with people that are also in that. Maybe not all of the people, certainly not all of the people are in that, but you can deal with a fair proportion of them. You put somebody way off on one of the tails, and man, it's one of the reasons I have to be in a city. I can't be in a smaller community because the chances of there even being someone that I could cope with in such a small community is just not there. And, I don't really like being in a huge city. Like New York terrifies me, for example. But there tend to also be, outside of that, there tend to be communities inside cities that are off. And unless maybe you're in some place like Sedona that's all off in its own little way or whatever, I don't think smaller communities can have, more than, they can't have a grouping of such people by just chance. It has to be wow, I came here because of this. And on the other hand, Eugene is always kind of seen as, wow, more Portland than Portland or whatever, It's like, yeah, it's really the hippie town. Not that I'm a hippie, but I think some of that lostness that attracts people here, or did at one point, I think some of that is similar to some of what I have. Some of that is similar to what attracts people to a life of a more artistic nature. Some of that, pain, emotional pain is heavily associated, I think, with certain of these things. All of this makes it more likely that I would run into someone here, at least, even on a different level. But the reality is, yeah, I'm just not gonna fucking meet people. I'm just not. And that's why, as soon as I found her dead, other than whatever, it's even hard to express. But the immediate selfish feelings, and the ones that have maintained throughout, are the I am not going to ever have anything like that again. I just don't think it's possible. I had mostly given up, which is why I kind of settled on her in Phoenix. Because I had online relationships where there was a lot more passion showing through in the IMs, not IMs, PMs between one another. There wasn't here we just kind of coldly and dispassionately decided, that we would try to have sex and see if we have a relationship or whatever. Um, and so the other option is the thing, that I would say to her, I might as well have a dog or a cat, Is that true? Maybe. Maybe that's enough. When I was staying at my mom's, when I was recovering from my first my first ex-wife separating from me, booting me, there was a cat. There was also a very lovely dog who completely adored me, and I don't think that's the solution. It's not someone I can really talk to. They won't talk back. I can't amuse them in the same way. It's really easy to fucking amuse a dog, but it's not the same kind of thing. Yes, you're bringing happiness, but it's like bringing... I'll tell you what it's like. It's like bringing happiness to normal people, not to that little sliver that's over for me. That's what the difference is. It's like there's this plane of discourse and of patterns, and I'm not saying that it's some kind of elevated or exalted level. It's not. It's silly as shit. But it's something that only comes from not just being human and using language with one another and playing with language, but a particular style of language play, a particular style of thinking. And, I don't know. I've never been with anyone who is not probably exceedingly intelligent. I don't imagine that would be a good mix. I imagine that we would both be miserable. And that is part of what I need to cure that loneliness. Those couple minutes of statements, whatever. It's talking on a plane that's more than the plane that I think your normal person talks on. And I say I don't want it to be exalted or whatever. I don't. It's something. It's silliness. It's not something that is anything other than inside jokes and whatnot. But there's a connection there that feels like it just could not be made with someone if they don't play the same kind of word games. I don't know. I don't even know what to call it. I mean, it's not anything that you'd be like, wow, those are really clever people or anything. It's not like that. But it's like it couldn't happen if that wasn't there. I've had what I'd say are sort of adjunct and relationships where I'm attracted to someone physically and they are relatively normal in intelligence maybe, but that didn't click. But I could kind of force it out of the... Or it may not even just be, it may not be intelligence, it may just be that particular type of intelligence, it may be that Asperger's defected intelligence, whatever. It may just be that slice. It's something I called the spark. And if you didn't have the spark, it just didn't work. Having the spark isn't enough, but if you don't have the spark, you're out. You're not there. And that spark is what I see as that, you know, 1/10 of 1% or whatever. I don't think that it correlates with the highest IQs, but I think it correlates towards the upper end. I think it just is. It is what it is. And it ain't easy to find. It ain't easy to find. All right. So the point there is it definitely doesn't exist in non-humans that I've communicated with. It's not just a matter of having something to talk at. It's not just a matter of having a warm body to put my feet on in terms of like a dog that would be happy with it. That's like this, almost a perversion. It's almost the wrong side of it. It's like a pet. I don't know. Cats come closer, to tell you the truth. I don't think cats are anywhere near as intelligent as dogs, but they have that feral quality that I think actually is part of what it is. There's something beast-like in. It's like a cunning. There's a little bit of evil in it. There's, and a dog is sort of the opposite. A dog is like everyone in the world. I don't know. So I mean, maybe a cat could help me. I'm not sure my games can cope with a cat being around though. I'm not sure the mess that I create can cope with a cat. But at the very least, I wouldn't have to haul food for my wife anymore. A bag of cat food wouldn't be too bad. We shall see.